Hey, noble ones, welcome to Metatron's Academy. So today we're going to go a little bit into a deeper linguistic analysis of one of the aspects of Mandarin Chinese, one of the languages that I've been studying for a few years now. This is one of the aspects that has been one of the hardest to really single out because it's quite deep. Now, it has to do with pronunciation, but then again, oftentimes when we focus on pronunciation of a tonal language like Mandarin, of course, we tend to overemphasize the importance of getting the tones right. In this case, the 4 tones of Mandarin. The reality is, though, that today I actually want to speak about consonants specifically. That is not to say that tones shouldn't be addressed. That is not to say that vowels are interesting in their own merit, but it's simply because there are 3 consonants that have been driving me nuts for some time. But I think I may have come to a certain level of an understanding, but I also want to double check it with you and possibly your ear and your expertise. So the syllables in question that I'm talking about are the sounds B, D, G. Oh, and the W. We're talking about the W too. Now, if you've studied Mandarin, generally speaking, for those of you who have studied Mandarin, you have been taught that these are, phonologically speaking, voiceless, unaspirated stops. So, while they are written as B, D, G, they aren't supposed to be pronounced B, D, G, but they're supposed to be pronounced B, D, G. So, to give you a visual representation of that, we spell them like this, okay, in Pinyin, of course, but you're supposed to pronounce them according to the International Phonetic Alphabet, P, T, and K. If you didn't know this, then you might have a lot of questions when it comes to this, and I want to address a few. So basically, we're talking about the B, D, G, the way we spell them, but the reality is that even according to International Phonetic Alphabet, they're actually supposed to be pronounced like a P, T, and K, respectively. But if they are supposed to be pronounced P, T, K, then why the heck don't we spell them like this? And the reality is that we actually do, depending on what system you use. But in the system that is the Pinyin, which is, I believe, the most commonly used these days, the reason why we have resulted to actually spelling this way, even though they are not pronounced the way you would imagine, meaning in a voiced manner, is because otherwise, if you spell them like this, a lot of new learners would end up pronouncing them like this, which means with an aspiration. You see the little H that follows here in the IPA? What this means is that this is basically the way most Anglophone speakers pronounce their P, T's, and K's when they are at the beginning of a word. So, P, T, K. To give you an example, pike, take, keep. Okay, there is a little puff of air that comes out of these, and this took some time for me to learn, by the way, as a non-native speaker. These do exist in Mandarin, and they are phonemic. What this means is that there is a difference between T and T, and if you get it wrong, you'll end up saying something else, which is why I believe we ended up spelling this way, because at the end of the day, even though Mandarin speakers, and I'll get to some exceptions, but Mandarin speakers, they don't voice these, and they pronounce them as this. If you voice them, it isn't the end of the world. You'll have a little bit of an accent, but you can't get confused between B and P, okay? They are dissimilar enough, because that's really the crux of the matter here. The crux of the matter is, in Western languages, including English, including Romance languages, oftentimes we ask, is this voiced or is it unvoiced? For those who don't know, a unvoiced sound like the p, 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 t, 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 k, k, k does not use the vibration of your vocal cords. The equivalent, so the exact same mouth position, but with the vibration of your vocal cords, is a b, g, j, b, g, d. Okay? It's the exact same thing, but now your vocal cords are vibrating. If you're enjoying this video so far, please take a moment to check out my Patreon page. With as little as a $5 support, you can help us ensure that we can continue to produce high quality and high researched content. And at the same time, you get access to polls, extra videos, unlisted streams, and much more. Thank you so much. Keep in mind that, for instance, in vowels, the vocal cords are always vibrating. And when it comes to standard Mandarin, 普通话, believe it or not, vowels are the only sounds that are supposed to have vibration, because all consonants, they are either followed by a puff of air, like in tr, kr, p, or not, like in t, k, p. Now, as an Italian, the t, k, p is my basis. This is why when you have an Italian accent, we won't say ticket, we will say ticket. We won't say pike, we will say pike. That is because we don't have the puff of air version. Now in English you have all of them. You have all three. You've got the three with the puff of air, the aspirated versions. You have the three that are unvoiced, unaspirated. And you have the unaspirated, voiced. You've got all three. Something that I've noticed is that there is what can be considered a divergent place of articulation. Even though this is the way it's taught, when you do listen to Mandarin speakers, sometimes you do hear the freaking d, you do hear the freaking g, and you do hear the freaking b that in theory shouldn't exist. So, are you going mad? Are you imagining things? Is your brain correcting sounds as a way to approximate them in your voiced, unvoiced mind? While it is the case a lot of the times, you're not completely crazy. Because here's what I found out. What I found out is that there are what can be called divergent places of articulation that can occur in specific situations in some regional varieties. We've just figured out that if it's written D-A, if you say da, you have an accent. But if you say ta, like in da suan, or da xue, I'm really pronouncing a T. T is just that it has no aspiration. Yeah, that's the way you're supposed to pronounce it. Very important that I don't do ta, because that's a different sound for a different word, a different character. However, in the Beijing variety or accent, not the words that are specific to Beijing, and we're not even talking about rotatization, the Beijing accent as they speak standard Mandarin. Sometimes, when they speak very fast, native speakers from the capital city may exhibit specific phonetic divergence that is called intervocalic voicing. This happens during rapid speech due to the name intervocalic. It happens when the consonant in question, the B, the D, or the G, is found in between vowels. As far as I know, this doesn't happen at the beginning of words, so if the first sound that you're going to make is a D, a B, or a G, then pronounce them unvoiced. Native speakers will. But if you're speaking very fast, some of those will turn into D's, G's, and B's in the middle of the sentence, and that's where you sometimes hear them. This is, once again, it's because of this intervocalic voicing that occurs, in my opinion, because there is bleeding out the voicing of the vowels, one at the beginning and one at the end, bleeds into the consonant and makes it voiced a little bit. So imagine something like this. If I were to speak very slowly, I could say 大家好, 大家好, 欢迎来到我的频道. Okay? But if I speak very fast, 大家好, 欢迎来到我的频道, it is a bit of a D. It is a bit of a D now. And the same can happen with the G's. The same can happen with the B's. And I think it does happen in Beijing accented speech. Once again, I'm talking about when Beijingers speak Mandarin in the standard way, because of course one thing is 普通话 and one thing is 北京话, in the sense that in the specific Beijing regional variety, the sort of dialect we could say, upon which the phonetic system of standard Mandarin is based upon, when they speak that, there are other differences. One will be, for instance, the very excessive rotatization, a little bit of arhua or arhuayin, the pronunciation of r sound is present in Mandarin, standard Mandarin here and there, but it's overwhelmingly present in the Beijing Hua. And then, of course, so that's obviously one of the characteristics of this speech. They also have something called lenition, which is where sounds get fused together and sort of chopped off, if you will. A bit like, instead of saying 不知道, they end up saying Burdao. So not only there is the addition of the arhua yin, but there is also like it's actually all smushed together. That is one thing that does happen. So this is a matter of articulatory characteristics and vowel space analysis. So we can talk a little bit about articulatory characteristics and vowel space analysis. But even when they don't use these specific ways of speaking that is full-on Beijinghua and they actually speak in Putonghua, they do have this characteristic, and I have noticed it. Now, as a Mandarin speaker, what I personally choose to do, let me know what you think, is if I speak slowly, I will make sure that all of my consonants are unvoiced. And even when I'm speaking fast, I'll make sure that my beginning consonants are unvoiced. But what happens in the middle, I personally don't care. And if I get a D in there, and a G in there, and a D and a B in there, I personally don't think it's a problem, because I truly believe that native Beijingers do it too when they speak fast. Which is why you thought you were going crazy. And trust me, it took me some time to find this information. Another thing that I would love to talk about is tone pronunciation differences, because yes, there is a difference in tones. I'm not even going to go into those situations where in one region something that is a fourth tone turns into a second, because yeah, I mean, that's problematic and it requires its own time, I suppose. No, I'm talking about the tone stays the same, but the way it's pronounced may be slightly different. And this is another characteristic of Beijing accent that I'm noticing. The tones appear, at least to my ear, to be enunciated more, in fact, exaggerated more. And I'm noticing that this is mostly the case in all tones, but the ones that I'm noticing the most are first tone seems to be higher in pitch than what you normally hear in other varieties. So actually like a ma, very high. The other one, the second tone, appears to go higher. So you will hear Beijing speakers that will say cha, cha, or zu cheng, like it really goes high. When it comes to the third tone, it goes way low. And of course, as I would say, pretty much every native speaker, the majority don't actually pronounce the full third tone. They go into the half third tone that is very low in the vocal cord, sometimes stays low or goes ever so slightly lower, but never rises up. That's how most people pronounce it. Exceptions being, in my experience, words pronounced in isolation sometimes, or perhaps if it's the last Hanzi in a long sentence and it happens to be a third tone, I've heard speakers fully pronounce it then, the so-called academic third tone that goes down and then high. Otherwise, it's always going to be, rather than ma, it's going to be ma, ni hao, rather than ni hao. Like, never, it's at least in my experience, it's like 90% of the cases it's going to be half third tone. And then, of course, the fourth goes further down. There is a lot more to say, but really today I wanted to focus on these. One more thing that I wanted to say is the W. But this is not just a characteristic of Beijing, but it's a characteristic of northern China. You are told that the W is a W like in water. This is the case in standard Mandarin. So if you want to speak like a newscast presenter, always treat it like a W in water. So you can say Wo, you can say Wen, so Wenhua, for instance, or Zhongwen, and Wang, so on and so forth. But when it comes to the general northern accent in a little more of an informal scenario, I noticed that they turn it into a V. But they don't do it all the time. They never do it when it's followed by an O or when it's followed by a U. So they never say Vo for Wo, never heard it. But they will say Zhongwen, and they will say Wang instead of Wang, and they will say Wan Fan instead of Wan Fan. So should you pronounce it that way, or should you stick to the W sound everywhere, the W sound everywhere? I find it endearing. So if I'm teaching Mandarin, or if I'm having a speech, I think I would pronounce mostly the standard way, situation dependent. But if I'm joking, maybe I'm playing a game, or I'm just chatting with a friend, or what we could say, 有时候跟我的朋友聊天, when that's what's happening, then I do tend to revert to a V sound, because I actually like it. 我要吃晚饭. It kind of sounds nice to me. Anyways, that's what I wanted to talk about today. Quite a few things. Then another incredible curiosity, and I'm going to stop it with this, but when it comes to, once again, the Beijing variety, believe it or not, I think they are the only ones that also have the th sound and the th sound, like in English, the interdental fricative. When do they do it? I noticed that they tend to swap the Z for a th when followed like by an I, like z, hanzi. I've heard them say the, in fact, not even the. So z becomes the. I've heard it. I don't do that. It gets too confusing in my opinion, at least for me. And then I've heard them do the th sound, but I'll be honest, I think it's a tai. Maybe the t sound that turns into a th, but I'm not 100% sure about that one. But believe it or not, yeah, those sounds do exist when it comes to native speakers of the Beijing variety, of the Beijing Hua. All right, so thank you very much for watching. I hope that this was interesting, a little bit of a rambling. But if you have been trying to learn this D sound, B sound, and G sound, and you're like, man, they keep telling me that it's unvoiced, but I'm going crazy. I don't think it is. It is unvoiced, but there are some speakers that sometimes, when it's found in the middle of a sentence, in between vowels, they will voice it. Thank you for watching.